this evening, our meeting. I just ask that if there's a bit of liquid left in your cup, please don't throw that in the big brown yard bag, because then it'll soggy mess in my car, and I don't want that. So I left a bin there to dump any leftover liquid, and then plates, pizza, everything can go into the compost bin, or into the bag. Thanks.
And I assume they're going to get pizza. Awesome. So we're going to sing Grace, and I'm hoping that Twyla can sing a bit of harmony. I'll step away from the mic, and she'll be closer to the mic. And no? Okay, we'll both be kind of back here. Okay. We haven't practiced this. Be present at our table, Lord, be here and everywhere adored. These mercies bless and grant that we may spend our lives in serving Thee. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Go and get your pizza. Sorry. I think it's really loud. Maybe. There's no audio on the feed. Before Edward gets a chance to come up here, this morning church was on the parade, and so I didn't get a chance to preach, and I needed to make sure that the audio was live for those that are watching via YouTube before I started to profoundly inspire you. Because now I get to preach. Oh no. From the letter to the Ephesians, I therefore beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Whenever the church gathers, and gathers in the name of Christ, Christ is here with us, God is with us, and the Spirit anoints us. But we participate in that, and I ask that we, in all of our discussions, in our listening, in our hearing, that we ask that the Spirit be present as we discern collectively as a group, as we feel the Spirit urge and emerge. And so I want us to also recognize that we might not agree with everything that we hear today or the next door neighbor, and you need to take it into the spirit of we're all here because we love this place and the community to which it belongs. And so we cannot help but pray that the Spirit be with us in all of our deliberations. Come with a spirit of grace and love. Amen. Was that long enough there, Rael, or should I stretch it? I can go on. Pat had already a great sermon, and so I could reiterate it. Wasn't it a beautiful thing? I mean, she knew that there would be more people that were going to come, and so anticipated, but even still had to remind us, only your daily bread, take only your daily bread, only what you need, not more than you need. Amen to that one too. Do we have any more other reflections today? Do I still need to stretch it out, or should I go get myself some pizza? I hear an amen on the pizza. Good, all right.
Hi, everyone. We've got a lot to share tonight. We're pretty excited about that. Dave, I might be echoey. If I am, if you could bring me down a bit, that'd be awesome. Okay, my name is Adam Gerhard. I'm on the space team, Space Force, space team, whatever we're called, with Spaceballs. We've been working for quite a while on a lot of stuff. You've had some updates over the last couple years. We'll give a bit more of a where we are and how we got here, but really excited to have Edward here. Edward is our developer who's been working with us for the past year or so on options, and we've gone through some really interesting sort of twists and turns in this, as we sort of expected. We didn't know where we'd end up, but we're at a pretty exciting place. And so we're really thrilled to have Edward here to talk about where we are, some of the proposal that he's got, and then we've got a couple motions that'll be circulated to move us on to the next phase of this. So what you're going to see from Edward are some essentially the context of where we are, some of how the landscape has changed, what that has been in terms of an opportunity for St. Mary's Road United Church, which is pretty exciting. He's going to show you some mock-ups so we can get our heads around what this might be like. These are just pretty pictures. These are not floor plans, but it will give you an idea about what we're talking about. And also talk a bit about budget stuff and pro forma and where we might be financially with this. And then all that to give us context to say, this sounds like a good idea. Let's move forward. The moving forward is still a lot to do, but we'll talk more about what that is, and you'll see in the motions too about what the moving forward is. So this is the chance to hear from Edward about what we've got and ask some really good questions. And so some of the space team is here too to talk about that if we need to jump in and support Edward with some of these conversations. But otherwise, Edward, we're excited to hear where we're at. So welcome, Edward. There you go.
Thank you, Adam. I actually dressed up today because last time I was in front of you all, Sean was making jokes about all my tattoos and me being a biker. So I thought I would look a little professional today. So we can flip to the first slide. So just going to kind of give a bit of a history of where we got to here, where we started. Some of you I know were at our hopes and dreams, and the changes in the real estate market and kind of where we're going, where we're proposing to go, and the model that looks like. As Adam said, kind of some of the concepts, they're pretty pictures of conceptually what could look here, as well as some conceptual floor plans that kind of inform how many potential units. A little bit of what does St. Mary's get out of this, some elements on what the risk management is, and then timeline, as Adam said, there'll be a spot in there we're going to dive into the motions after we've kind of gone through a whole bunch of information. If we can flip to the next slide, please. So where we started, the Spaces team about a year and a half ago put out a competitive RFP with Trinity Centers, now RE11, to developers who might be interested in partnering with St. Mary's to look at reimagining the space. The Spaces team evaluated those proposals, and myself and A Good Life were selected as the developer. And one of the first things that we did was we had a hopes and dreams session here. Like I said, that some of you were in attendance. And then we did a separate one with the youth as well, kind of listening. It was an exercise to listen and hear what the fears were, what the hopes are as we move forward and as we look at how we design and integrate what the project is. The next slide, please. So the original concept when the Spaces team chose A Good Life was it was going to be more of a typical real estate rental project where the land would be put into a partnership with A Good Life as the developer, and we would be looking at more 80% market, 20% affordable. Obviously renewed congregational space, and then some commercial and social impact space on the ground floor. That was the original concept that we would have talked about last summer and fall. Next slide, please. So one of the things that's my job as a developer is to look at what the market is telling us and what the risk factors are. And so looking at a 80% market building with 20% affordable, that means it's mostly 100% privately funded with a little bit of government grants. And right now, there's a lot of apartments being built in Winnipeg. Not affordable apartments, but market apartments. And there's going to be a surge in the next 18 months of a lot of units hitting the market. And with federal immigration shifts, federal policy shifts on immigration, that has brought down the immigration numbers, which was being a big part of where developers were banking on the demand continuing to increase and not plateauing, whereas now it's plateauing because the immigration has kind of been slowed down rather significantly. The other element to it is the construction costs versus returns for private equity and for private investment, with costs going up in the last few years and not really slowing down a heck of a lot with tariffs and situations south of the border. And then CMHC, which is the federal government's insurance program for market rental. They've been making it harder and harder for rental projects to qualify for the insurance, which then allows the numbers to work because of the real estate markets in Toronto and Vancouver, and a lot of projects failing in those markets because of a heated market. Next slide, please. So last fall, while we were kind of working through all of this, there was a bit of a game-changing opportunity that the new federal government brought in called Build Canada Homes. And the intention of Build Canada Homes was to cut through the bureaucratic barriers that make CMHC-backed projects hard and unworkable, actively encourages partnerships between developers, government, nonprofit organizations, basically what we want to do here, and provides substantial federal capital through both grants and forgivable loans to qualifying housing projects. Each project is evaluated individually, meaning the right structure unlocks the right funding, whereas anything in the CMHC realm was, here's the box, if you don't fit in it, you don't get the money. What is Build Canada Homes? So Build Canada Homes was launched by our current federal housing minister, Gregor Robertson, on September 14th with a $13 billion mandate to become the one-stop shop for affordable housing, finance, and development in Canada. As I kind of mentioned, replacing CMHC's slow approval processes and streamlined partner-first model. Encouraging private developers, nonprofit, municipalities, provinces, and Indigenous communities, funding both affordable and mixed income housing, not just social housing, with the ultimate goal of doubling Canada's pace of housing construction over the next decade. As I mentioned, the initial launch was $13 billion of capitalization, including $6.7 billion in the first 5 years, so 2025 to 2030, plus loans and asset development. The capital is mixture of grants and forgivable loans, which is key for having lots of affordable housing. Winnipeg was selected as one of the priority cities for them, partly because the City of Winnipeg has been a fantastic partner in the Housing Accelerator Fund and has been making some strides in actually creating housing. And it's explicitly designed to catalyze public-private cooperation. The exact model that I'm going to share with you for St. Mary's moving forward. Next slide, please. So the partnership model, private developer, St. Mary's. Can't happen without St. Mary's here. It's your land. Government, so the anchor partner is the federal government, Build Canada Homes. The province, Manitoba Housing, City of Winnipeg. Whoa. Yeah, we went one too far. There we go. Perfect. I can get some water. Okay, so I'll start that back. Private developer, development expertise, St. Mary's, obviously, it's your land and your property. And government, so federal, through Build Canada Homes, province through Manitoba Housing, Efficiency Manitoba, and a couple other arms. And then the City of Winnipeg. And then community partners, nonprofit housing partners, community foundation, philanthropic entities, and social enterprise operators. A revised direction built on stronger ground. So in the next few slides, I'll walk you through the proposed concept that we've been working together, myself and the Spaces team, to kind of get to this point. Again, this is 100% conceptual. We can't go start the conversations with the federal government without the buy-in of the congregation and the approval to start moving forward, because there's key pieces along the way. So next slide, please. Again, these images are conceptual, and I know one of the things that Phil had highlighted to us on multiple occasions is the question he gets the most is, what could the new congregational space look like? So this concept, again, conceptual renderings, takes space and takes elements of this building and that building and marries it into the new space, including brick and wood features. So modern, bright, and welcoming, flexible for both worship, events, and community gatherings, and designed to serve congregation for generations to come. Next slide, please. The vision from above. So we have an east and a west tower, a two-story podium, which is the larger brick component that you see on the ground floor, which would total about 40,000 square feet. St. Mary's space would be on the ground floor of that, and that's where in the conceptual images you would have seen some nice bright big windows out to the courtyard, and up to 396 residential units. These are just a couple more renderings and kind of reiterating, the 40,000 square feet podium space. Conceptually, about 10,000 square feet of that would form St. Mary's, and then 30,000 square feet would be available for social enterprise and commercial space. Space such as a cafe, daycare, food bank, and then a rooftop amenity space for residents. Next slide, please. These are conceptual floor plans that kind of give you an idea of the units. And now in order to make a project like this work, it's kind of going back to where houses used to be when in the 1940s and 50s we would build a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house that was 700 square feet. So these units range from 350 square feet for a studio, 450 square foot for a 1-bedroom, 550 square feet for a 1-bedroom and den, and between 685 and 725 square feet for 2 bedrooms. And then the 3-bedroom units would be in the East Tower, and those would range between 900 and 1,000 square feet. This kind of breaks each building down. So the West Tower, conceptually with 180 units, 90 of them being market, 90 of them being non-market, 12 residential floors, about 15 units a floor. And then the East Tower would be looking around 108 units of market and 108 units of non-market, over 13 residential floors and about 17 units per floor. A big piece of the final unit count will be Those are the baseline square footages, as some of the units will be to a Rick Hansen accessibility design standard. That unit count will ebb and flow a little bit. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the baseline of the numbers at this point. These numbers are derived from market data on a square foot basis of what we have at the moment. So the land value is estimated at $3.235 million. That would be subject to a formal appraisal. Hard costs inclusive of a 7.5% contingency, totaling about just over $97 million. Soft costs, which are everything from design, city fees, insurance, legal, accounting, of $15 million and change. And then an allowance for finance costs of $2.35 million. A big part on the finance cost, because I'm sure any of you could look at a $117 million number and say $2.3 million doesn't seem like a lot of money to finance a project like that. With Build Canada Homes, because it's forgivable mortgage grant, as well as the other funding sources that I'm going to get into next, they don't actually charge any interest during construction. They register an interest on title, and if you default on that, that's a different story. So that's kind of the high-level financials. On the land, so the land was based on a per acre land value plus the additional value attributed to the number of apartments on the site. It's not necessarily reflective of what St. Mary's could list this property for tomorrow and sell. So as I mentioned, a formal land appraisal would have to be undertaken before that land value is finalized. I kind of touched on the hard costs. It's all on a per square foot basis right now. When we're further down the path with detailed drawings and a construction manager on board, we'll have refined numbers with quantity surveyor review as well. And then the soft costs, just drilling into that, architecture, structural, mechanical, electrical, interiors, geotechnical, environmental, community engagement, civil, landscape, survey, appraisal, pre-construction, development management, construction insurance, development and building permit fees, branding, leasing incentives, lease-up costs, plus a 5% contingency. And then on the finance, I kind of highlighted that one already. So, how the $117 million gets funded. I missed updating that number. My apologies. So, we've had a lot of meetings with various provincial organizations. And so the province of Manitoba has a number of fantastic funding sources. So there's 2 tax credits, one for $8,500 a unit and on the market housing, and one for $5,000 a unit on the affordable housing. Manitoba Housing has a forgivable loan of $70,000 a unit on the affordable units only. And then Efficiency Manitoba, and I know environmental sustainability was a big piece that came out of the hopes and dreams, and that's reflected with the potential grants from Efficiency Manitoba that will be somewhere between $1.5 and $2.5 million based on ground source heat pumps and a few other elements of environmental efficiency. And then City of Winnipeg has, these numbers are based on last year's intake from the City of Winnipeg. Those numbers will come out for next year, later this year. But Housing Accelerator Fund base, affordable only, $35,000 a unit. And then Housing Accelerator Enhanced, which requires partnership with a nonprofit, of an additional $15,000 a unit. And then they also have the multifamily sustainable housing grant of $10,000 a unit, capped at $3 million. We have an allowance of $2 million for a community bond and a plug number that we would be talking to the Winnipeg Foundation and looking at about $2 million there. The land equity, the land value, what St. Mary's investing in the project, so to speak, is the 3.2. So the Build Canada Homes funding request would be approximately $79 million. Next slide. So beyond the base building, so the shell of the building and the residential units, the podium space build out, there will be the social enterprise center, which is estimated at about $7.5 million to build that out. And then sanctuary, worship, and community space of 10,000 square feet with a placeholder amount at this point of $4 million. How exactly those get funded, there's a variety of other sources for that. But I feel it's important to put those numbers up front now so that we don't think that the $117 million includes fitting out those spaces. Next slide. No, yeah. So from a market rent, non-market rent, I will caveat the non-market rent is based on 80% of the median income. Some of the nonprofit partners we've been talking to will be at that, and others will be below that. Until we know that was exact, these are placeholders for now. So on the market side, studios, $1,450, one bedroom, $1,650, one bedroom and den, $1,750, two bedroom internal, $1,850, two bedroom corner, $2,100, and three bedroom corner, $2,300. These are based on new construction in Winnipeg of projects that when I put these numbers together 2 weeks ago, we're currently renting for. Studios on the non-market, $1,160, one bedroom, $1,320, one bedroom and den, $1,400, two bedroom, $1,480, and three bedroom, $1,840. With those numbers, it has a gross revenue of $7.63 million. CMHC has a 2.8% vacancy rate that they look at the market, and that's how anyone will look at the market. So that's allocated in there. So an effective gross revenue of $7.4 million. Typical operating expenses for a project of this size are somewhere between 26 and 32%. So we've got about 28% right now. So the net operating income on the residential is $5.352 million. And then the commercial revenue, and from an underwriting perspective, we have to apply numbers, applied $20 a square foot. So the total combined yearly revenue after operating expenses, not including any interest, finance, or other related charges, would be $6.1 million. Next slide, please. So the nonprofit housing partners. We have met with quite a number of different housing operators in Winnipeg over the last, June? 6 months, I guess. And where we've kind of settled on, so to speak, is 1010 Sinclair. For those that don't know 1010, they are pioneering independent living for persons living with physical disabilities. And the model empowers residents to live fully and independently with the supports they need, not the limitations others impose. Why we feel that they are a great fit is they bring specialized expertise in accessible design standards, disability-informed housing management, and advocacy for resident rights and dignity. Cohabit, a mother's love, a community's hope. Cohabit was envisioned not simply as housing, but as a place of belonging, a community for adults with disabilities that allows them to live with dignity, connection, and choice, surrounded by people who care. Why they fit brings a community-first philosophy that aligns deeply with St. Mary's values of welcome and inclusion, and residents are full members of the neighborhood. And then our lead kind of housing partner is Sarah Riel. And Sarah Riel is on a mission to provide individuals with mental health and substance use addictions challenges a safe, inclusive, and engaging environment. Sarah Riel believes every person deserves stability, connection, and the chance to thrive. Designated as the lead housing provider, Sarah Riel's extensive relationships with Manitoba Housing will unlock additional wraparound supports delivered directly from the Social Enterprise Center on site, and partnership with Sarah Riel unlocks the potential of the $13 million in forgivable loans for Manitoba Housing. Next. Anchoring the podium, proven social enterprise model. So Build and Purpose Construction were part of the co-founding of the Social Enterprise Center, which Sean has been heavily involved with, and I've had the opportunity to tour that facility at 765 Main in the North End. And it's a collaborative ecosystem of social enterprises, charities, cooperatives, and training programs working under one roof, supporting each other and driving community change across Manitoba. It was established in 2012. And the vision for the ground floor, the podium space at St. Mary's, is an ecosystem model, not a single tenant, a collaborative hub of social enterprise training programs and community services. The existing Social Enterprise Center is 30,000 square feet, and Build and Purpose are incredibly excited about the potential opportunity here to take that 30,000 that they're already bursting at the seams and have been for a number of years, and have an opportunity to evolve that model further here. Another key piece with bringing them into the fold is they've got a proven model. They're not starting from scratch. Next slide, please. So on the same token, Build and Purpose Construction, partnering with whomever our general contractor is in a construction partnership that does lower cost to a point, but the key pieces of it are it's training tradespeople and delivers proven quality, and it's training tradespeople that might not necessarily be given the opportunity otherwise. So elements such as the drywall and taping, finishing carpentry, painting, cabinet installation, and their biggest credential is they do almost all the renovations between the two of them for Manitoba Housing and Manitoba Housing units. Next slide, please. So construction manager selection. Some of this stuff is more for information and understanding once we leave here today some of the other steps that we're going to be taking forward. We're not going out tomorrow on this step. We've got a lot more work to get to this step, but this is so that you understand part of the RFP process in selecting a construction manager. That won't happen until the preliminary design is complete. So we will issue an RFP. The shortlist currently is Boxstall, which has been in Manitoba for over 100 years. Concord Projects, which has been around for 45 years. And Ledcor Construction, which is based in Vancouver, but has national presence and a Winnipeg office. For those that don't know, I live just north of Regina and Regina Beach, and the gentleman that oversees Ledcor for the Prairies lives 4 houses away from me. So I have that direct connection to them as well. Next slide, please. Financial controls and project oversight, how the project protects everyone. Financial controls and insurance. So once we have the preliminary design and we've kind of created more detailed budgets, we'll have an independent cost consultant and quantity surveyor be engaged, and they'll review the preliminary drawings. They'll look at the market data that they have. A cost consultant quantity surveyor is required on every single market project that you see out there, and it's the bank's insurance policy. So they go through and say, based on this design, this budget makes sense, or based on this design, this budget has no bearing on reality. And then they also inspect the site every month to make sure that the billings that come through are the actual work that has been completed on site. The short list would be at this time, and it could evolve, Postma, which is a local Winnipeg-based cost consultant, BTY, which is an international firm, and Altus Group, which is also an international firm. Once the construction begins, there's a specialized course of construction insurance policy that's put in place covering the total replacement cost of the project for the duration of the build if something was to happen. And then obviously, I think it would go without saying, but an independent third-party accountant and auditor that will review everything as we're moving forward. Next slide, please. The legal structure and congregation protections. So the main difference from where we were before was the land was going to be rolled into a joint venture, and as the developer, I was going to be putting up a majority of the equity, and then I have the control of the property once it's rolled into that partnership. With this model, it's a nonprofit that's going to own this building. Single purpose entity. Once the funding is committed, the property would be rolled into the nonprofit. And one of the motions that will be coming up is going to discuss that. The final board would have representation from the legal community, the development community, property management, accounting, nonprofit, and construction to ensure a balanced approach to how the property is managed in the long run. And then part of protecting St. Mary's is a community benefits agreement that forms part of that partnership that binds the partnership to St. Mary's in respect to things like the sanctuary and worship space, the non-market housing commitments, the social enterprise mandate, and St. Mary's continued role as a founding member. As well as a development management agreement between A Good Life as the development manager and the nonprofit entity, and then having independent legal counsel that's not related to anything that I'm doing, not related to anything that St. Mary's is doing, or the other benefits, so that or the other partners, so that there's no conflicts should problems arise. What does St. Mary's actually get? A reimagined home, a brand new purpose-built sanctuary, worship, and community space, modern, bright, and designed around the congregation's needs. Those were pretty pictures, but as we go forward, there'll be lots of consultation on what that would end up looking like and being in the end. Community legacy, 198 non-market homes for Winnipeg neighbors who need the most, plus Social Enterprise Center 2.0, a hub for employment, training, and community programs. St. Mary's values made permanent in brick and mortar. And then a financial return. So at the end of the day, St. Mary's is the seed investor, so to speak, in this project. By putting the land in, there's a value on that land. And within the partnership, there would be a yearly dividend that would come back to St. Mary's, recognizing that initial investment of the land that would structure long-term support for ensuring St. Mary's is financially sustainable, as well as funding additional programs that the congregation might want to embark on. So the congregational the timeline at this point. So we're here in June 2026 for a congregational decision based on where we're going or where we're proposing to go. Through the rest of the summer into September, we would be working on the legal structure and agreements with the intention of, once those are completed, starting preliminary design in the fall. And a preliminary rezoning application of the City of Winnipeg in October, with a full Build Canada Homes submission, which needs certain things like the drawings, slated for in and around December. A Build Canada Homes decision, hopefully by March of 2027, and then hopefully starting construction sometime next summer or fall based on Build Canada Homes and their commitment to the project. There will be 2 motions. I don't know if someone wants to come up and talk about the motions in more detail, because I'm kind of at the end of mine, and then if we want to go through the motions, and then I can open it up to Q&A on everything else.
Okay, I'll just speak to the motions. There are 2 motions. I have copies here. They're pretty, Don's going to hand them out. Don, the one with the larger font, you might, there's one with the larger font, and there's one, the one with the smaller font is, motion 1 is on one side, motion 2 is on the flip side. The one with the larger font is actually 2 pages. Okay, so the first motion is really just, like I keep just summarizing it, but you'll see it's more than what I'm giving you justice. But basically it's the path to continue the path forward. So the path that Edward has laid out for us. So let's just focus on motion number 1 for now. I do have ballots, so I'm going to let everybody just read that. And if we're prepared to vote on motion 1, we do have ballots, but I do see Adam coming up. And I don't know if you want to add anything else. Yep. Okay, Adam, come on up.
We want to give you this so you know what you're going to be voting on, but there is lots of time for questions, so we're not moving to voting quite yet. Because you've got them all, what I thought we'd do is we'd read through the motions so you know what we're talking about, and then lots of questions about what Edward talked about. You can ask questions about the motions, all that kind of stuff. We won't move them quite yet, but if that's all right, we'll go through that. Just a couple comments about where we are. So we are at the one-way door conversation. So if you remember, we've been talking for a while, we've been using the metaphor of one-way doors and two-way doors. The two-way doors are things we can keep coming back from. We are at a one-way door, and the reason why we're at a one-way door, i.e. a decision that we can't really come back from, is because we have to be the first group to say we're doing this. We can't go to funding partners, we can't go to investment partners, we can't go to social partners and say, do you want to do this? And then say, but we're not quite sure yet. So we have to say, we're doing this, do you want to come along for the ride? More than coming along for the ride, do you want to be investing in this? So that's why it's a one-way door. It may all fall apart, right? Stuff might not happen. Maybe Build Canada Homes doesn't work. Maybe the partners don't come through. That might happen. We might come back here and say, okay, we need a plan B. But that's not where we start with this. We start with saying, we want this, we're going to do this, and now we can go and get people to sign along with us so that we can start to get a good proposal for Build Canada Homes. We need those partners and all that kind of stuff. So that's why this is the one-way door. This is a sign on the dotted line. If everything comes through, then the timeline that we put up there happens and we end up building by next fall. If stuff doesn't happen, then we have other conversations. And just a comment about the process in terms of, again, you have lots of time for questions. For us to understand, this is a congregational vote. It is okay to say no. We are saying, the leadership team and the space team is saying this is where we think the direction is. We've done a lot of work around this, and this is what we're proposing, but this is a choice, and it needs to be understood as that. It's okay to adjust some of these motions that are up there. They're lengthy because we wanted to put context around it. So it's more in the form of a resolution. So there's a lot of those whereas clauses. I will walk you through that. They're not as scary as they look. And it's okay to ask lots of questions. If you don't know, so there's ways to adjust this in terms of process. Just talk about what your concerns are, and if you think changes need to be made, we can figure out how to do that from a process point of view. So if it's appropriate, we'll go through, I'm looking for Riel to make sure to go through the motions, and then we'll go back to the questions if that's all right with folks. Okay, so Dave will sort of go along with this as I go. There's 2 motions. The second one relies on the first one. The first one is commitment to redevelop, to the redevelopment direction. This is the one-way door. So The whereases give you context for why we're making this decision, and then the be it resolved that, so it's a resolution actually, not a motion, and there's a whole bunch of points there about what we're going to do. So we'll walk through it. Hopefully Dave will have this scrolling behind me. So whereas St. Mary's Road United Church has undertaken a lengthy and comprehensive discernment, planning, consultation, and exploration regarding the future of its property and community presence at 613 St. Mary's Road. So that's just saying we've done a bunch of work. And whereas St. Mary's Road United Church, through discernment, believes that to live out our mission and vision, there's a piece that's, oh, is there a piece that's missing there? I don't know why there's 3 dots. We'll look at that and see. There's supposed to be some beautiful words there that says we think we need to do work with our building. So I apologize for that. We'll have to put that, see if that's there, or take that whereas out. I apologize. And whereas the congregation has been presented with a redevelopment vision including, and so this is just being clear about what we're proposing. So the demolition of the existing church building, the construction of a new mixed-use development, including worship, community, social enterprise, and housing components. That's just what you were presented. Partnerships with housing and community organizations. Again, that's what Edward just talked about, the various organizations that we're going to be partnering with, potentially. Inclusion and consideration for existing ministry use, including the food bank and community groups, and shared ownership, governance, and operational relationships within the redeveloped facility. So that's just so that we're super clear on what we're talking about. We're going to build something new here. We're going to have our stuff in it. We're going to have partners that are going to be in it with us, and there's going to be shared ownership and shared governance. And whereas the congregation recognizes that the advancement of the project requires clear commitment to the redevelopment direction in order to secure development partners, housing partners, funding opportunities, and project financing. So we can't move forward unless we say that we are going to move forward. So we know that. So with all that in mind, including fancy words that apparently aren't there, be it resolved that the congregation of St. Mary's Road United Church, 1, reaffirm its intention to proceed with the redevelopment of the property at 613 St. Mary's Road in substantially the form presented to the congregation. So what Edward just presented, in substantially that form. That's the 2 towers, the mixed-use space, all that kind of stuff. The pictures, again, were just so we get a context of it, but substantially that form. 2nd, authorize the leadership team, trustees, and space team to continue advancing the redevelopment project, including negotiations, planning, partnership, development, funding, applications, due diligence, and preparation of agreements necessary to implement the redevelopment vision. So lets us go forward. 3, affirm its willingness, subject to all required approvals and final agreement. 2, this just reiterates what we're doing, just so to be super clear what we're agreeing to. Demolish the existing church building, construct new worship space, enter into partnerships, and participate in governance. Those are the 4 points. So we're going to do all those things. 4, direct the leadership team and trustees to return to the congregation for approval of any final binding agreements involving transfer and encumbrance of property, incorporation of new legal entities, long-term partnership agreements, financing commitments, or other matters requiring congregational or denominational approval. So if there is something financially we have to come back to, we have to come back and get approval for that. But that will be, the conversations we have going forward are not if conversations, they are how conversations. Or not should conversations, they are how. So no longer a question of should we do this development work, it's how we're doing it. So we'll come back for those kind of final approvals. So, and further resolve that this motion represents the congregation's commitment to the redevelopment path as chosen direction for the future mission, ministry, and property of the church. So this is the motion that says we're doing it. And this is what doing it means. Is that clear? There's going to be lots of time for questions. The second motion then is the redevelopment of a not-for-profit entity or development of a not-for-profit entity for redevelopment. So a bunch of whereases in here. The first whereas says, whereas the congregation of St. Mary's Road United Church has affirmed its commitment, because we just passed Resolution 1. We haven't, when we do it, we'll pass Resolution 1, or Motion 1. Reaffirm its commitment to proceed with the redevelopment of the property, including the construction of a mixed-use development incorporating worship space, community space, social enterprise space, and housing partnerships. So, whereas we said we're going to do that stuff. Whereas the implementation of this redevelopment vision will require partnership structures, governance arrangements, and access to public funding that may necessitate the creation of a not-for-profit entity. So we need to make some entity to be able to do this. And whereas the congregation affirms that the redevelopment is intended to advance and embody its mission, ministry, and vision, and while operational control and governance will necessarily be shared with development, housing, and investment partners, The identity, purpose, and ongoing ministry of the church must remain protected within any governance structures. So we're doing this, but the governance structure needs to protect our identity as a church and our mission and vision. So we're not doing this, we're not just building a building and walking away. We're doing this as a missional project, and this says that we want to protect that. So given all that, resolve that, the congregation authorized the leadership team and trustees to work with our development partners and the Prairie to Pine region. So we're going to work with several folks to do the following things. Establish a nonprofit corporation with 3 members, 2 appointed by the leadership team and 1 appointed by Edward Archibald. That will be the governing group. The nonprofit will apply for resources to undertake key to redevelopment objectives, and the nonprofit will not be authorized to borrow money at this stage. So they'll start up the work. Work in partnership with project developer, housing partners, and potential community partners in designing the governance and organizational framework for such an entity. So we have to figure out what the governance structure is going to be. So first create a not-for-profit that starts, and then decide how this governance is going to go forward. Ensure that the mandate, governing documents, and agreements of such entity explicitly reflect the mission, vision, and ministry priorities for the church, and that the appropriate mechanisms are included to protect and advance those priorities over time. So this is us saying to the folks building this, yes, go do it. Make sure you're protecting our interests as a church. So we're authorizing the leadership team to go forward with this, but making sure that protecting us is in there. Ensure that the governance structures of such entities include appropriate safeguards for the church, is that the church is not expanding its risk portfolio and also remains a core mission partner within the project. So another note about protecting the church. Obtain the legal, financial, governance, organizational, and tax advice as may be necessary. So that just highlights that we need to go make sure we're advised by experts. Prepare proposed governance models, partnerships, agreements, operating relationships, and related material for consideration by the congregation. So when that's done, it will come back. And return to the congregation with recommendations and proposed agreements for governance, execution of binding partnerships, transfer or encumbrance of property, assumption of liabilities, or any other actions requiring our approval. So we're going to set up an initial board to start doing all this work, but when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, come back to make sure that we're all okay with this. Again, that will not be a should we do this, it will be a how are we doing this question. And further resolve, the purpose of such entity or entities shall be to support and advance the redevelopment vision previously approved by the congregation. So we're doing it all in line with what we said. Okay, that's a lot. The reason why it's a lot is to hopefully, in the first instance, make it really clear to us that we're going forward with the redevelopment work and all that that implies, including the taking down of the building and a bunch of other stuff. And the second, that we're setting up a structure that will let us go forward in a way that protects us, but still lets us sign agreements with folks because we need to go forward and start to sign some of that stuff up. Yeah, Michelle. Do you want to just come up to the mic? We're gonna move into question time. I want to just go over that. We're gonna move into question time essentially now with Edward, questions about the development or about the motions, and we'll sort of go from there. We won't actually move the motions yet, but I just want you to have these in mind as you have questions for Edward or questions for us about the motions. Oh, Dave's just gonna fix it.
Land.
This will only be using our land?
Yeah. Is that correct? Like just all buildings?
Right.
What our buildings are on is what I mean.
It's just this land currently. The project could consider buying other land if that came up, but
then we would have to go somewhere to worship.
no.
Oh, it will be done in
Phases.
Fair?
So the plan is to do it in phases, right? So the first phase would be the West Sanctuary. That would get demolished and we'd build the tower there. And the second phase would be to demolish this and build the tower there. That's been the baseline. If that's different, we would have to come back and say, stuff's changed, here's the new reality, what can we do?
And would the buildings be adjoined at some point?
Would they be joined?
Yeah.
Yes, it would be one building at the end. So we don't know where that line would come, what's left, when that construction happens, we don't know where that line would draw. But eventually it would feel like one thing.
Okay.
But 2 towers, right? So the podium, again, we haven't done some of those drawings yet, but the podium level and then the towers would go along with it.
Thanks, Michelle. I think there's going to be questions along two different lines, so maybe Edward, you could get up there too and answer the questions about construction, design, phasing, like what we just heard. And Adam and myself could take, and anybody from Space Team could take questions on process, motions.
Yeah. Okay, hang on for that. What I would suggest is let's start with questions for Edward first, just to sort of contain it so we're not off on all directions. Let's start with questions for Edward about the redevelopment thing, and then we'll get into questions about the motion, just so that you know. So lots of hands up.
Maybe you could just come to the mic if you're comfortable. If not,
Yeah, that would be the best way to do it, and then we'll go from there. That's as far as that will go. Yeah.
One question online, and this was a question that we had at the meeting as well.
Okay.
It says on the slide where you interchangeably using non-profit or not-for-profit.
Thank you.
question about not-profit versus not-for-profit versus not-profit.
It's a it needs to be a non-profit. Yeah, sorry, if that's used interchangeably, that was done incorrectly. We'll have to correct that.
Edward, this is particularly addressed to you. I want to know what your experience and your company's experience is in this particular type of project.
In terms of church redevelopment or large-scale projects?
Church redevelopment.
I am working with a church in Barrie and a church in Regina, currently doing the exact same thing right now.
And how many employees does Good Life have?
10.
Okay. Because on your online, there's nothing about that on your online piece.
Yeah.
About your company. So, and there was some questions that I had that came up that in terms of past projects that you've worked on that there wasn't always some positive comments.
Yep. And that's part of why the structure is being set up the way the structure is. There's a lot of lessons I've learned along the way, and it's important that things are laid out from the beginning and transparent. And I guess there's two sides to every story. And at the end of the day, that's why this is being set up the way that this is being set up. So that St. Mary's has their hands in control, I have my hands in control, and we can move forward collaboratively.
And when does your control end on the project?
My intention is to stay involved in the project after it's completed.
So you'd have a financial gain from.
I would receive a development management fee for being the developer, but any involvement past the development would be on my own volition. I wouldn't be being compensated for it.
Okay.
I think, Sean, do you want to make a comment about that too? Because there's been some work that we've done around.
Yeah, so we've already contacted a lawyer. Edward has said there'll be independent legal advice. And the contract that the nonprofit has with the developer, there'll be milestone-based, and we will be very prudent around risk when we negotiate it. I've probably spent the most time with Edward, and this is an exciting project that he's brought forward to us, and we're excited to move forward with him. The agreement that we'll eventually have will be one that is good for us and also good for a good life, and make sure we move forward together, state of the art.
A couple of questions. The first one is in regards to the money before the nonprofit gets formed, because it's going to take a while for that nonprofit to be formed. My husband and I were just involved with creating a nonprofit. It took us a year to get everything done. So where's the money coming from to get all of those legal pieces done before the is it going to come from your partners, or where is it going to come from?
There's grants through Manitoba Housing and the Winnipeg Foundation that are there specifically to help get a project like this set up from a nonprofit perspective.
Okay. And then Adam, you talked, and I want your opinion as well, is the checks and balances as we go through the project, will there be certain periods of time, and what happens if there is something that all of a sudden, like a year from now, you come back and we just say, we don't agree with this? Are we going to have those checks and balances?
Yeah, there's a number of places, and in the motions you'll see that where protection steps to say we got to come back to the congregation to talk about governance structure and that kind of stuff. Those conversations will be, like I said before, less about the should we do it, but more about the how we should do it. So we don't want to be, we can't get to the point of we can't get to the point of debating should we redevelop again. This is the last chance to really do that. It should be at that point, okay, this is a challenge, this structure isn't going to work for us. What is a structure that could work? And if we get to an impasse, we'll sort of figure that out then, but there will be opportunities to have some of those conversations at that point.
Okay, great.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just add that it's specifically point number 8, motion number 2. If you look at point number 8, that's one of the points that Adam was referring to.
That's why they're very long.
Yes. Do you know what the neighborhood is thinking about these two 12-story towers that are coming up here? And are there any others 12 stories high in this neighborhood?
So, to our knowledge, no, there's no other 12-story proposed projects like this. St. Anne's and St. Mary's have been designated by the City of Winnipeg as high-density transit corridors, which then allow the increased density specific to the City of Winnipeg for a rezoning, or a pre-application rather. That would include what the parking is going to look like on the property.
Thank you.
I would note, just so that we're clear, this is not going to magically improve our parking situation, adding 2 towers of residential, right? We are landlocked in a place where there isn't more parking. And so right now the church owns 2 parking spots. We rent 8 more, 5, we own 5, whatever, we own a number. Yeah, we rent 5, we own 2. You know, I don't know that it's going to get a lot better than that, street parking, that kind of stuff. So this is not a magic fix for that at all.
When Ed was showing the conceptual of the new sanctuary, I noticed he mentioned that it was not a finished space and there was additional cost to finish the space. Is that something that's being budgeted for already, or is that something that the congregation has to consider as an extra?
So there was the one slide where I had the social enterprise space and the congregational space. So there is a dollar figure budget for that. There are additional funding sources, community bonds, social enterprise, social impact bonds that can be sourced for both the congregational space and the social enterprise space, but that's not part of the $117 million number.
And you had like a $77 million.
$4 million for the congregational space and $7.5 million for the social enterprise space.
Okay, thanks.
And so I have a question for Edward around that. Clarifying that there's a big price tag to that, but the project, once we get it going, will be responsible for figuring out and proposing back to the congregation, which might have to have some work in there, but it's going to be part of the project to make that. We're not delivering a big box and saying, good luck with your $4 million to figure that out. Okay. Yes, there's a lot of spaghetti stuffers.
Hi, Jeremy Reed. Couple of questions. Would it be possible to just bring up the funding stack slide?
The funding?
Just the funding stack sources. Yeah, so I'm Jeremy Reed. I'm the brother of the minister, and I currently CEO of the University of Winnipeg Community Renewal Corporation and UWCRC 2.0. I do multi-res housing. So just asking here a couple of questions around the stack. So right now you're looking at the identified sources above with Build Canada Homes coming in at the 80 million. And so, and you're looking at 50% affordable currently, a 50-50 split. And you've had conversations with Build Canada Home around their appetite on a 50-50 split and funding at that level?
I've had conversations with Minister Robertson directly on that.
Okay, and he said?
This is the kind of thing that he wants to see happen. So Minister Robertson was Mayor of Vancouver when I got started on the development side of the equation. I worked with Minister Robertson a bunch back when he was the Mayor of Vancouver. And I had the opportunity to have some one-on-one time with him in Thunder Bay in January, and that's kind of where this evolved from, is my conversations with him in January in Thunder Bay, where he wants to see the mix, right? You know, like, I mean, we're in Winnipeg, but there's a project in Vancouver Woodwards, and it was transformational in the Gastown area, and it was in essence what this is. And that's, there's not too many people that are proposing something like this. So when I brought that to his attention, he was quite encouraged and excited, and you know, that's why his words were, that's what I envision with Build Canada Homes, where CMHC programs wouldn't allow something like this.
Well, the ones that don't exist anymore. They're being replaced.
Yes.
So, question two, just on the pro forma, I guess, on the flip then, in terms of the annual income of the 6.1 total.
Yeah.
Right? So where were you marking the debt service covering against that?
So there is no debt service on this because it's a forgivable loan, and the forgivable loans don't charge interest.
So you're seeing this building clear $6.1 million a year?
Unless Build Canada Homes, and again, this is all hypothetical because we don't have the application in, but looking at everything that has been committed to date, along with the conversations with Manitoba Housing, they register the interest as a mortgage, and once the term is done, it's extinguished, but they don't actually charge a debt service or an interest rate on it.
Through the course of construction?
Correct. Oh, and afterwards. Yeah.
So they're looking at forgivable loans with patient capital on a 50-year term at that kind of. Okay, now last question is just about organizational structure and governance. So I'm assuming, so there's, in this, in terms of non-repayable sources from the province, the city, province and the city, let's put it that way. You're looking at, what, 25 million-ish there? If I add quickly, 11, 25,
Yeah, about that, yeah.
Maybe? 28 million. And so the idea here is that the church vends in land. The church, with other partners in some organizational structure, achieves successfully $28 million in non-repayable grants just from those sources, leaving Build Canada Homes alone for a moment. And the idea is that the church benefits from its equity contribution against the total sum project, so about 2 or 3% of the $6 million a year then goes direct to the church. And why is it assumed that the church could not structure itself with a nonprofit and achieve this kind of thing on its own without changing its governance? That is, not having a fully controlled entity of the church to assume this kind of revenue working with a development partner? Question.
Well, if churches could, I would say they would have by now. I don't know of any church that has, and when you start bringing in additional partners, whether it be the Social Enterprise Center or some of the other nonprofit, they don't want to be at the, I guess, mercy of one entity. It becomes a collaboration. So it's not one entity controlling the entire management of it. And Sean's
I guess it would just be a question then of why you would, so you could do a partnership, right, with joint equity being brought to the table here. In this case, it's assumed that all the equity that is raised would accrue to the nonprofit and not an equity partnership share with the church along with the land. Am I understanding that correctly? That's what's being proposed? Okay, I can point you to an example of a church that's done it differently. Okay, thanks.
They're just curious, are there any risks of the city of province changing things, whether it is zoning requirements, funding requirements, that kind of stuff, us signing off now to when building actually starts? How are we protected from possible change?
Is there any risk that city, province, or feds change the funding programs between today and when we put a shovel in the ground? Is that the question? Yes. There's 100% that. September, Build Canada Homes didn't exist before September 14th of 2025. The City of Winnipeg Housing Accelerator Fund grants that are in the capital stack are based on the last issuance of Housing Accelerator Fund grants. There'll be a new issuance, new request for proposals that'll come out later this year based on Winnipeg getting another tranche of money from Housing Accelerator Fund. It's government. They can change anytime they want, and that's part of developing. And from my perspective, when we started this project, we were going to be 80% market, 20% non-market, and it was going to be the developer, myself's control once we got to a spot. And because of market dynamics and funding program changes and equity market changes, we pivoted to where we are today. So could there end up having to be another pivot yet? Absolutely, yes.
Part of why this is important to do now, again, this is not to say too much pressure. We have conversations and we have decisions to make. But when we get an organization set up to actually start to lock these things in, it's important to do that now. So yes, there is lots of risk. If we talked about this for another 5 years, it would be an entirely different conversation because the situation would change. So getting some of those programs, starting to the application progress to lock those in. If something happens, that's the falling apart process, a part of it. If something happens, we may have to come back and say, okay, the world has shifted, now what do we do? So absolutely there are risks. But I don't think there's risks, correct me if I'm wrong, once we are approved for that funding, I don't think there's risks of them saying, psych, you don't get the money. Right? I think once you get that money, you can, as long as you're using it appropriately. So that's not the risk. It's not a risk of they give us money and then they turn around and say, no, you can't have it anymore. The risk is us not getting it and not getting access to it.
Okay, so we should be fine. Once we're approved, we're going to make sure all the approvals happen before any demolition begins.
Yeah, so the comment was, will we get approval and make sure before any demolition gets done? That's the idea of this stage, is to do that work, to line up all the funding, to line up all the partners, to say we have a thing that based on all the mechanics and all the governance and all the funding, that this will now work with any change that's happened between now and when we actually all finish signing. But once we have that package, we can go. And then there's, risks still happen, but we will figure out ways of mitigating. Is that a fair way of framing that?
Well, and I'll just add to that, nothing, not a construction fence will go up around a building, not an excavator will show up on site until the budget is 100% fixed on the costs. And there's change orders that happen, and that's that. But the base budget is fixed and all the funding agreements are signed. Nothing will happen to this property physically until all of that is, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
All right. It's so loud. Okay. I was just wondering if you could clarify a little bit around the rental costs for the various units. I know that's going to be what it'll be, and I'm sure it'll change 1,004 times before it's kind of set. But I don't know if it's possible to bring that slide up. I don't know where it was. No worries. It seemed like some of the units, you described them as non-market costs, I would argue are still fairly unaffordable for a lot of the folks that we would maybe want to, if the church is wanting to act as sort of a force for good in sort of the housing market, that a lot of that would still be out of reach for some of the sort of underhoused populations that we're hoping to reach. Is the idea of having those sort of housing partners that they would have additional grants or additional funding for folks who are living with disabilities and stuff like that, that some of these groups are serving, that they would have additional grants and income supplements that would help cover some of this? Or is anybody who is living here paying minimum $11.60?
Nope. So to model out the 5,000 different scenarios of affordable rent would have been, I would have spent a month of Sundays. So for the purposes of the model right now, I just used 80% of median income. I know all three of the nonprofits that we've been talking to. Some of the tenants are rent geared to income. Some of the tenants are paying way less and there's a rent subsidy. So at the end of the day, those numbers are simply for creating a revenue model.
Okay.
But the actual rents that will be charged at the end of the day will be rent geared to income and based on those nonprofit. And that's why we're bringing those nonprofit partners to the table, because we can't sit here and say, well, the rent's this and the rent's that. They're serving their community and their population, and they know what they're able to either secure in additional rent subsidies or their tenants are able to pay to begin with.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, so on the question of, since we're making a one-way door decision, now, I was a little worried about, are we taking on any risk in, like, financially, in costs, in the fact that we're throwing ourselves in and we're committed to something and we haven't secured things yet. I understand that probably the nonprofit, since it's going to have grants, is going to take on a bunch of that. But can you speak to that? Is there any risk we're taking on in saying, okay, we're in this game, we're doing it, we're making it happen, and we're not sure that, you know, we can't be sure those fundings will actually come in? The numbers could end up being significantly different. Obviously, there'll be a conversation then, but say it goes a lot worse than we thought, and we get Build Canada Homes Act, we will only approve like half as much. What does it look like then?
Then we have to pivot and look at a different funding model, right? So at this point, you know, in approving these motions tonight, it allows us to move forward to the Winnipeg Foundation and Manitoba Housing to get the initial seed money that we need in order to start drawings so that we can actually take the project to the city as well as the construction companies to get costing, so that we then have an idea before the final application goes into Build Canada Homes. Build Canada Homes comes back and says, we'll only give you 40 of the $80 million. Well, then we have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how the rest, or amend the project.
I don't think we're taking on, like, we're not taking on financial risk yet. There will be at some point, well, I don't even know if there's risk. The project, any project like this is inherently risky. This has got some echo stuff going on, Dave, if you want to tune this down. We're going to manage that through all the structure we're going to create, but this is the first step to start to secure that stuff, to reduce our risk, to reduce some of that concern, and we can't do that until we've agreed that we're doing it, right? And so this doesn't inherently tie us to any risk yet. There will be, once we know what the funding will be, that will come back and say, here's what it is, and if there's some significant risk there, we'll need to share what that might be. But hopefully the structures and stuff we put in place will mitigate that, and we'll come back with proposals. We don't want to do something inherently too risky, right? That's just not what we're trying to get into.
All right, thanks.
I guess this is maybe not part of it's too early in the design thing, but it's going to be 12 stories high. When you go up, so we're zone 3. When we go, how many? Maybe two or three stories. We go to zone 2. So I'm thinking about where people are going to design, what's going to be happening on the balconies and things. If there was people wanted to grow something, or plants that would stay over winter, because there has to be some green there, you know, and that's. We have to think about that. What worked in Vancouver will not work here. I know that. So that's what I was thinking about. You know, it's a different kind of design that's going to have to be happening here, and that's my concern.
Where's the green?
Where's the green? We want some green in you know, because we're losing the little bit we had, and that's important, I think. So, and if we're having families living here, in those, there should be balconies where kids can grow seeds to know what it means to grow and to watch things like that. I guess I'm a gardener, but mine was an early childhood specialist before I became a mother and a gardener. Thank you.
I'll just, with the initial renderings, there's courtyard, ground floor space that still has a whole bunch of design work that needs to go into it. There's also the podium space, which is connecting the two towers, that has, landscaping and trees, and I think making sure that it's family friendly and enhances the neighborhood is key to the design factors moving forward.
The other piece I'd add about green, unless you said this, because I just talked to Sean for a quick second. Did you say about in the building green in the design? Okay, so a lot of what we're doing with the building is designing green, right? So wastewater, heat reclaiming, trying to get no fossil fuels, and like a bunch of that stuff. So the building itself will be green as well, which is important. It's not the same as growing stuff, but it is an important factor in it too. That's part of our missional stuff brought to it, right? That's part of our values being injected into the building and stuff that we'll maintain as we go through the project.
Okay, I have two comments about previous questions and then one question that's sort of related. So I understand the concern about partnering with somebody for this, because I brought that up at a previous meeting, like, well, do we lose control? Not that the United Church of Canada has control of this building, not us. So, but the truth is, I could do my own dental work. I could get the tools on Amazon and I could totally find a YouTube video to show me how, but I think that's probably a bad idea. So I think I didn't hear that. What? I said you've done it before. Well, once or twice. But I didn't realize who said that. I wouldn't have engaged. But yeah, so I think partnering with somebody who knows what they're doing is probably a really good idea. As far as how the neighborhood's going to react, we've had a discussion about that, and my shop is right across the street, so this is going to affect, as far as businesses in the neighborhood, me quite intensely during the construction, and my view is going to change a lot. But also, now as a business, I'm going to have towers full of people to come to my shop, so I think that as far as the neighborhood, local businesses are certainly not going to be opposed. The residents, again, we'll have discussions and we'll see how that goes. My question, I guess, sort of is when, I know you said that we can't really go to the neighborhood until we have something to say, but I have actually already had people in my shop. One is part of a group that uses the space for something, and they're like, we're getting kicked out. And I'm like, you're not getting kicked out, it's going to be in phases. And I think that maybe, do we know when we're going to sort of start to put something out there that people, like after this vote, or that so that the community will know, because that is, now that person who I talked to is probably going around saying, oh yeah, they're doing this thing and they're just tearing the whole place down and we're going to be pushed out. And but what they don't know is, well, they do now, is that we're going to be doing it in phases, and that they still could have a space to rent from us to have their meetings and whatnot. So do we have any idea when something's going to be discussed with the community?
When we have actual real designs and not concepts. So I would suggest probably the fall, before we submit the rezoning application to the city of Winnipeg, we would be engaging with the community in the neighborhood. Going into the summer too, there's not a lot of, I've tried doing community engagement in the summertime, and that often backfires too, because then they say, oh, you held it in the summer because we're all away on summer vacation, right? So I would, given where we're at, I would suggest that we'd probably look at starting to engage the community in middle to late September, assuming everything's kind of moving forward as it should, and we have actual architectural designs, not images that I've sketched up and used AI to create on the site to kind of give everyone a visual of what it could look like.
Okay, I just wanted to I think we need to, just to honor people's time, because we said 6 o'clock, right? To 6
Yes.
o'clock? So
I was just going to cut you off and say we weren't going to take your question because we're moving to the motions now.
well, we are going to move to the motions. I did want to say, I hope I'm not jumping out of turn, but there was going to be the possibility of people emailing their questions and stuff. There was going to be an email set up.
Dave is taking questions from the chat. So we've had a few questions from
the Space Force was going to create an email account that people could send their questions to. They would be kind of compiled, and then
we will super do that.
Right.
And
Just
we'll,
so that, because
yeah.
people are going to have tons of questions that they
Pat's
couldn't.
got that one.
Okay.
Adam
I just
wasn't in
wanted
that meeting.
that. I'm sorry, Pat. It's more. I'm asking the question more rhetorically to inform the people. Is what I'm doing.
So here we go. Aaron suggested this wonderful idea that we have a space team email address. And so because I can't even handle thinking about the kinds of numbers we're talking about here, I said I will collect any questions, thoughts, wonderings, create a gigantic spreadsheet so that we as a space team hear all of your voices. There'll be some questions that we can't answer yet, as we've learned already today, and there'll be some that we can take to the space team and to Edward and figure out what we're going to do. But not so tech smart Pat hasn't yet made that email address, so I will get it going and put it in the link.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I believe in you, Pat.
So moving to the motions.
Yes.
There was some variance between the motions that were sent out in the link this week, and just so, especially on the second, and just a question of clarification. I don't know, because what was sent out was working with the developer. Edward was not named in the motion that was sent out. So is the motion contingent on all of those bullets? And what is that effect if it is, are we committing to Edward at this moment with motion 2? Because that might change people's vote right this moment, right? If motion 2 is not dependent on Edward specifically, that might be different.
I would say it's dependent on Edward right now. If we don't want that, then if that's a concern for folks, then great, give us that message, but we'll have to, we cannot do this. I will check if the space team disagrees with me. As a member of the space team, I don't know how to take this forward without Edward. We could find, no offense to Edward, we could find a different Edward, but that's sort of putting us back to a different conversation to get here, which might have a different approach and would change wouldn't be this for now. I don't know if you want to talk to that, Sean.
I think Ken Thomas said it, strong termination clauses. Edward's not doing his job, we'll find another developer. But our recommendation is, he's brought this forward, we have confidence in him at this point, let's move forward.
And we can take that out if you like. But that's motion 2. Let's start with motion. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with motion 1. The two motions are set up like this. Oh yes, you had a question. Do you want me to? So Riel will comment on that.
Yes, leadership did ask the question. So the question is, do we allow adherents to vote? So members, obviously, adherents, yes. An adherence, the manual describes what an adherent is. I won't quote the manual because I don't have it, but I read it, and it says that basically it's somebody that is engaged, somebody that is known to the church. So you, Suzanne, would be a perfect example of an adherent. I know you by name, you are an adherent. I know this. So adherents can vote. But, I'm sorry? Yes, youth are members.
The youth, so adherents cannot vote or can vote?
Adherents can, yes, they
Yes.
can.
We would need to make a motion that adherents could vote. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so leadership is making the recommendation that adherents can vote.
I think what I'm hearing you say is you are making a motion that adherents would be allowed to vote. Okay, so here's, from a polity point of view, how this works. Riel has made a motion that adherents could vote. We need a seconder for that, which we have. Brad seconded that. Is someone taking these down as notes?
Yeah, Wes is taking
Okay.
notes.
Only members can vote on this. So I'm running the meeting now, apparently. Members, all in favor of allowing adherents to vote? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay, adherents can now vote. So that means anyone who so members are anybody that's in the church, and adherents are anybody who actively participates in the church but is not formally a member, correct? So that would involve youth as well. Okay. If anybody's confused about whether you're an adherent, looking around the room, I would argue that most people in this room are at least members or adherents. If you don't know, check with Phil. Okay. That's a good clarification. Can we move into the first motion now? Okay. So the first motion is the one that says we agree to do this. And the second one is the motion that lets us set up the nonprofit entity, and we'll clarify that language in there. Yes. Dave. We will, if people would like to make that as an amendment, we can do that when we get to that, if that's all right. So let's just deal with motion number 1. So this is a commitment to redevelopment direction. This is the one-way door. Again, the reason why it's a one-way door is because we have to put our names to something to say we're doing it so that other people can sign on with us. We have to build that up. So this is why it's the one-way door. It has several whereas clauses. Hope we have those in front of them. That just talks about the context. And then the be it resolved is the 4 bullets that it does, so that we're going to affirm our intent to proceed, authorize the leadership team to continue advancing this project, affirm our willingness to do what it says there, which is demolish, construct new worship space and building space, enter into partnerships, blah, 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 and then direct the leadership team to return if there's any binding agreements. And then the further resolved is the real clarification that this represents our commitment to the redevelopment path as the chosen direction for the future mission, ministry, and property for the church. Again, this is the one-way door, and it's important that we say we're doing this. So, yeah.
All right, thanks to those who are handing out the ballots. So just a... Yes. Okay, so there are 2 ballots. There's 1 ballot for motion number 1 and a second ballot for motion number 2. So we'll start with motion number 1. And just want to let you know how this works. You do have to put your name because it gets back to that member adherent discussion we just had. So if you signed in as a guest, you will not be filling out this ballot. So there's 3 types of people in this room right now: members, adherents, and guests. Guests are not adherents, so they cannot vote on this ballot. Adherents can, we just allowed for that. We do want names, so put down your name. And it's just to ensure that you're a member or an adherent. It's not to see who voted how. So we do need your name, and we do need you to say in favor, yes or no. And we'll repeat that same process with motion number 2. Thank you, Suzanne. I see Suzanne is collecting. I love this congregation. You know, people just get up and start handing out ballots and collecting. I love this. All right.
Are there questions about the motion, or are people already voting on it? Are there questions about the motion? It's just motion number 1 that we're doing at the current time. So if there are questions, or I think people are already voting on it, maybe we don't need to ask too many questions, but it seems like it's okay. Are there any questions or concerns about it? For clarity, it was moved by me, seconded by Riel. I don't know if we said that. So don't jump ahead and do number 2 yet. But no questions about number 1? Yeah, 1 question.
I have a question about how to mark the ballot. If I want to vote A, do I circle it or put an X through it?
Are there hanging chads? Are we going to get to that? If you are in favor of the motion, mark it yes or mark it, I don't even know, circle it? Make your intention well known. We're going to use Canadian Election Act stuff. As long as the intent is clear, we will accept it. Smiley faces are acceptable. Hanging chads will be counted. Okay, we're going to go count that 1 and come back. While they're doing that, I'm going to move over to motion 2. Motion 2 needs some clarification because there's 3 dots that I need to figure out what to do with. So 2 things with motion 2. First of all,
Just a word on the 3 dots.
Yeah.
Sorry, the three dots, just to let everybody know what the intention was. The intent was it was just a mental record to have the 5 principles of our church, the welcome radically. So we were going to add that, then we decided against it. Apologies, we forgot to take out the ... which was a mental, an aide mémoire to help us remember that's what we meant.
So I think that would say, then, this is going to be a friendly amendment to the motion to clarify, but it would say, and whereas St. Mary's Road United Church, through discernment, believes that this action is required to live out our mission and vision. Something like that. And then its mission and vision is referenced. So that's what it would say. Just to clarify what that would be. I don't know, Dave, if you can make that adjustment up there so people can see. And there was a question about non-profit versus not-for-profit. And it is so that was motion 1, the 3 dots were in. The second motion doesn't have those 3 dots. It does say non-profit and not-for-profit. It is a non-profit corporation. So anywhere where it says not-for-profit, it is non-profit. Those are different things, apparently. I did not know that. Is there any other questions about motion 2 before folks vote on this? And this is, again, moved by Riel, moved by me, seconded by Riel. And so that's why we're talking about it. Any questions about motion number 2? We do. I'm just going to see if there's any questions about number 2. If so, the first whereas, if we decide to vote no for motion number 1, then this is all moot and we stop. It should be non-profit. So with the first dot where it says establish a non-profit corporation is the correct wording. So anywhere else where it says either not-for-profit or it's not clear, we'll correct that to be non-profit corporation. What questions do folks have about this? The intent of this is, again, is to establish that entity to start, assuming we said yes to the first one. Again, if we said no, then this is moot and we'll go on. Yes? Yes. So, no. So in the motion, number 8, they return to the congregation with recommendations and proposed agreements for government model beyond this initial phase. The initial phase is to start getting people to be able to sign up with us. We have to sort of say yes and create this structure, and then we come back with what's the proposed governance structure. As Edward pointed out, we may want to propose that there's legal representation on it. Some of our partners who may be investing significant, like the Social Enterprise Center, may want to be part of this board. And we have to figure out what that would mean for us and how we maintain control. So there's going to be a bunch of conversation and negotiation around how that's going to work. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we would have. There's a point where we have to say we would have a say at the end before we go back to that. So the initial phase is this nonprofit to get, or not for. Sorry, I better read it right. Nonprofit corporation to get us going, and then we have the governance structure formal, the sustaining one proposed after that.
Aaron's got a question.
I hope. Oh, sorry.
Aaron, go ahead.
Aaron, and then we'll go to.
There is some question around non-profit versus not-for-profit. Is there someone in the room who can provide us clarity of the difference between the two?
You can't incorporate a not-for-profit, but you can incorporate a non-profit. So we're incorporating a non-profit. This is going to sound funny. And a non-profit is also not-for-profit. So you can have a for-profit business that's not for profit. That's not what we're doing. We're establishing a non-profit. Yeah, a non-profit is also a not-for-profit, but the wording is okay, but it would be better if it read non-profit. Yeah, thank you, Slores.
Non-profit is an official government thing. Not-for-profit is like I can say, I'm doing this not-for-profit, but I'm not an official entity.
Right. If Dave, if you have a sec to scroll down to bullet 1, that's where that's the correct wording. Jeremy, yeah. So there's some legal, so there's a, yes.
It's without shares.
Okay,
It's no shares. Without shares, without share capital, without share corporation.
is that what we should put in here, or is that?
That's your legal definition. It's okay.
We will figure out so,
We're establishing a nonprofit.
yes, we are establishing a nonprofit. And we will figure out the right legal way of doing that. And I hope that's okay with folks.
Change that in the vote,
Yeah.
of what we're going to vote as well as on the ballot, so that we know exactly what we're voting for, and it's a nonprofit.
Thank you. So put that on the ballot then. That's a good idea. So if you can cross that out, it's a nonprofit. Other questions? Thank you for the clarification.
I think we got results for motion number 1.
Do you want exact numbers? It's overwhelmingly in favor of yes. I can give exact numbers if people want.
We'll wrap up the exact numbers. We will share exact numbers in the link, but for now it's overwhelming yes in favor of motion number 1.
And then can I have a motion to destroy the...
Do you want to make a motion to destroy the ballots?
Not yet.
We'll do that at the end. We don't want them to destroy their ballots while they're using them. We'll destroy them at the end. If folks want to hear the numbers, you can ask for it. This is an open conversation. Let us know what you need. Are there questions that people have about motion 2, Barb?
Well, I just have, so people are questioning about whether this will include Edward on it. And I don't remember yesterday, but didn't we already have discussion where we decided Edward was our guy?
Edward is our selected guy. If something happens, I don't think this ties us to him. It does mention him specifically in the first phase of this because that's what's going to happen right now.
That was the...
We have already gotten engaged. So the question is about Edward being on this list. He was selected. We have agreed to him. If stuff happens later, yes, we can change that. But this does say the first phase of it is with him because that's what's happening now with him.
Just to clarify on that, you're referring to the letter of intent. We signed a letter of intent with Edward already. That happened in September 2025, I think.
Yes.
So that was sort of like the first stage that I was referring to, but now we're going into the non-profit.
Jeremy.
Just a question on without share capital corporation structure and the intent. So understanding there's an LOI with your developer. Is there a reason why that needs to connect? Is that are explicitly stated in your LOI that you would become part of the not without share capital corporation that has a proper membership of your church? I'm assuming like the purpose of the incorporation is such that you have an entity be able to apply for things like proposal development funding, those kind of things. That would not necessarily require you to have your development partner name, but incorporate without share capital corporation with 2 members from the church, or 2 members or single member if you wanted, and withhold then the actual interim or final structure of that to a later date that would allow you to proceed to start making applications, et cetera, and proceed with your development.
So the comment is that we may be able to set up that non-profit corporation with just us and not necessarily need to include our developer. I don't believe it, and the other comment was unless it was part of the LOI, and I don't recall that. So I think that's...
They're not mutually exclusive decisions. Because the LOI can say, we've selected
Right.
life as our developer. Now you're making a separate decision to say, and we're going to include that entity into a governance structure.
Right.
Interim governance or not. To remove a corporate member afterwards requires, it's a more extensive process under the Corporations Act than adding some of these later dates. So I just wanted to, and I don't think it would preclude you moving forward making applications to the province to any of the funding sources that I saw to have the full membership not fully rounded out at this point.
That is very interesting. I don't know exactly what to do with that. So I think there's a couple options for us. We could we could decide to do this anyway and put Edward on here, and I recognize Edward's here in the room, so it's a little bit awkward, but that's okay. We could give the leadership, we could remove most of that. We could remove we could just say establish a corporation. Let's do this. I'm going to suggest this. It says, be it resolved, the congregation authorizes the leadership team and trustees to work with our developer and Prairie du Pine region. Those are the main people involved, right? So this is not our developer in there. To establish a nonprofit corporation. We could stop there and then say the nonprofit will apply for resources and will be not authorized to borrow money. So we could just stop there and stay moot on who's on it and let the leadership team go and figure out who's best to be on it.
The difference is this. So, for example, if you have a holding control,
Yeah, let's do that.
The difference is this for the moment, right? If the church was to establish a nonprofit entity with itself as a single member and with a board of directors underneath it, the single member can decide to disband the board of directors at any point, so the church itself could disband the board of directors. You could establish a governance structure among the board of directors that could be inclusive of your development partner or not. You could do that at a later date, and it requires the consent of your member. But if you establish a single member court with an initial board of directors that's just comprised of the church, that would not preclude you, for example, for applying to the province of Manitoba for a proposal development fund. If that is then awarded, say it's up to what, $250,000 right now, or $350,000. If that were to then accrue to the nonprofit entity, that is equity now the church has to expend with on behalf of the development. But the monies are in your care and control until such time as you establish another governance structure. It also means that's an additional, whatever, $350,000 that you're bringing in as equity to development, but that's another point.
No. All right. I'm going to suggest, so here's the exciting part around how church governance works and how motions and stuff work. So we have a motion on the table. That's an amendment to the motion. So what I'm going to propose is this. Dave, if you can scroll down to number 1. That I think what we can, so I think there's some stuff we need to think through with that. So I think we still direct the leadership team to do this. I think the amendment I'm going to suggest, and maybe you can correct me on this, would be to remove, so establish a nonprofit corporation, remove the with up until the end of that period, just have that be the period. So remove up to as an interim board. So just say, establish a nonprofit corporation, the nonprofit will apply for resources, and blah, 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 blah. And so that lets the leadership team figure that out, and that lets us sort of do some of that due diligence about how that should be established. Does that make sense?
You should leave the interim board part, because later on we're saying that it would come back to congregation for the permanent structure.
So let's say, establish a nonprofit corporation with an interim board, period. And then go on to the rest of it. So it just removes the who's on it and the number of people. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. So this is yep.
As a matter of corporate law, it matters who you identify as the member of a corporation, even without shared capital corporation, the province of Manitoba has at least one member and at least up to 3 directors.
Yes. Perfect. So we don't have to do that here. We could do that. The leadership team could do that.
You might want to name the member being the church as at minimum the single member, so we know who the corporation is owned by.
Can you suggest language that would make that work?
Establish a nonprofit without share capital corporation with a single member being St. Mary's.
Establish a nonprofit corporation.
Jeremy will come over.
I think you can just establish a nonprofit corporation with a single member, which is St. Mary's
Road United Church.
St. Mary's Road United Church, if that's your legal name.
Okay.
Right, and then you can decide who the director is going to be. You can decide if you're going to have partners join it at a later date, all that kind of stuff, and you can add members, corporate members later. But this allows you to have care and control, even on an interim basis. What that allows is you can set up an interim board of directors But the member still has control over that board, so that the member can dismiss the board at any time. That sets up an internal structure.
Okay. Do you want to comment from up here?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I think we're trying to mitigate risk, Jeremy, too. Like, yeah. So I appreciate that. I'm so glad that you're here because you have a lot of expertise. But I think this is.
I think we need to have that St. Mary's Road is going to be the main person in this nonprofit corporation.
Okay. Did we get that language? I don't know, Dave, did you get that language that Jeremy suggested?
So would this work just before establish? Can we just say, okay, I'm starting from Prairie to Pine Region to 1. St. Mary's Road United Church, establish a nonprofit corporation with an interim owner.
I don't know, Edward, if there's any implications to the way this is going on that we should, there is? Okay. Is there things that we can do? Okay. What I'm going to suggest is, because I think, do you want to talk about it first?
Just to say that this amendment makes it a whole lot easier to sell to the property commission.
Okay. Edward, if there's implications here that we might need to hear about before we do this, that is okay to hear, or are there things that you can share? Is there things that we should do now that pause this? I don't want to get us into a situation that causes issues later. You can think about that, whether there's things you need to say about that. I think there are likely implications, but we can come back with other government structures if we need to. I don't know that we need to. I guess the question is, do we need to actually establish this here, or can we give this to the leadership team to hear some of the other implications and make that call?
I'm happy to take on people's comments over the week with that email account.
Well, if we let the leadership team, so if we let the leadership team establish this, and the leadership team can decide that it's one person or not, and decide what those membership is or not, based on due diligence, talking with the developer, talking with other experts, getting some legal advice on that about what the best way to do that, then the leadership team can make that call and vote to set it up, because you're giving the direction to the leadership team to go do that properly. And there's a bunch of stuff in here that says make sure you protect us. So we can do that. If the congregation's not comfortable with that, then we can do this, which is being suggested. But if this has implications, it doesn't let us change from that. And I don't know if we know what all the implications of that are. Because Edward has nodded to suggest that there are implications that we haven't heard all of them. That's the concern. Yeah. Do you want to come up here and?
Yeah. Sorry, maybe you can go first if you want.
I was just going to clarify for some people that haven't been in on institutional boards and a lot and such, that the member is like at SMRUC, we're all members and we vote at the annual assemblies to make decisions. So if SMRUC is the one member of the nonprofit corporation, it means it's the controlling entity.
Right.
Like, as opposed to having 10 people or everyone here, or it's just that it's the controlling entity, and then it can establish a board, it can revise regulations, it can, etc. So, just make it more accessible.
Yes, I was just gonna ask how much it throws off our timeline if we send this to the leadership team to figure all this language out and then bring it back to a congregational vote, which would have to happen in the fall.
I think if we give leadership team the mandate to set that, so if we stayed moot on the membership of it and asked the leadership team to establish it, it could then say, figure that out, and it could then establish, so we could act over the summer.
But if we want the congregation to have final control on this motion, like to approve whatever language the leadership team comes up with, does that significantly throw off our timeline if
Yes.
we then have to wait? Okay.
Yeah. No, it's a really important clarification. It does throw off our timeline, which So the implication of that, just so we know, people shouldn't feel pressured into making a decision, although there is pressure. And so because there is some timing around grants and that kind of stuff, that's a reality. And so that's just that we need to live in that reality and understand that those grants, getting at them sooner as opposed to later is important. And we also don't want to make the wrong decision. So that's the tension to hold. Yes. Yes, we're clarifying the wording of what we want to, of that amendment. Okay. Okay, so the amendment.
Can I suggest you remove interim board and say establish a nonprofit corporation of one member being St. Mary's World United Church?
Okay.
And have the leadership team work to recommend to the member an interim board of directors.
Okay. Can you give that language to Dave so you can write that up there? Oh, is that right there?
You're confusing members and directors in what you're saying.
Okay.
To establish a corporate member is to, do you want to Dave?
Okay, I would suggest the following language: establish a non-profit corporation of a single member, being St. Mary's United Church.
St. Mary's Road.
St. Mary's Road United Church, sorry. And that the member delegate to the leadership team the task of recommending the interim directors of the board, which is a different thing than the member. The member shall delegate to the leadership team the task of recommending to the member an interim board of directors. And I would just leave it there. It leaves it quite open. But it means they have to come back to you.
So this is what I'm going to suggest. So we got some draft language there, and I'm appropriately referring to it as draft language. I would like the leadership to consider this draft. We will come back. We could do this secretarially. We could do this through email. We could do this through phone calls.
You can't do it through email.
You can't?
You cannot. This vote can only happen in a congregational meeting.
Okay.
Yep, sorry.
Can it happen in multiple stages in person?
You can have another meeting to do this, but it has to be an in-person meeting. Email votes are specifically forbidden in the United Church polity.
I just don't want people to vote for this right now. Like there's too many wheels in motion.
I think we have to.
Okay. So.
Okay. I'm just going to ask for.
There should be an I after the R on interim board of directors.
Okay, so it sounds like we landed on this.
Yeah, I just want to check, Sean, if there's anything that we wanted to add from, because Sean is just having a bit of a conversation with Edward to see if there's anything we need to consider.
You guys need 5 minutes to go have a chat, because we can wait for 5 minutes.
Can we take just a couple minutes just to make sure? I just want to make sure that if we do this, which sounds great, that there isn't implications that we don't understand. Okay, give us just a couple minutes. We'll be right back. Okay. Having a quick consultation, here's what we would recommend that I believe maintains the intent and spirit. Instead of, can you just move that box out of the way? Yes. Where it says, should delegate to the leadership team the task of appointing an interim board of directors. So not recommending. Recommending means it has to come back, and we need to go. So what we're saying, it's a single member, being St. Mary's Royal United Church. The member shall delegate to the leadership team the task of appointing membership to an interim board. Appointing directors to an interim board. Appointing the interim board of directors. Appointing the interim board of directors, or appointing the board of directors. I don't know why it's interim, but appointing the board of directors. Okay. The interim board of directors. So all that did is, instead of recommending, it's appointing. Sean, can you make sure that language is right? If that's the right language? Or is that what we agreed to? That'll work? Edward's nodding. Okay. Okay, got thumbs up. Does that sit okay with people? Got more thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, so here's how this works. This is an amendment. We have to vote on the amendment. We're going to do a show of hands for the amendment, and then we're going to go on to what's next. So, all in favor of this amendment? Any opposed? The amendment's carried. Okay, that is now the motion. Any discussion on the motion now? Yes. Yes. I moved it, and Riel seconded it. At the beginning, I said that I had moved it, Riel had seconded it. Which is, yeah. Sorry if we didn't set that up there. Oh, yes, I did. I said it really fast. And yes, we didn't move and second the amendment, but it's okay. Sure, if you want. So, Riel, sorry, who do you want to have move that?
So, I can move it?
You don't have to. No, somebody else can move that amendment. If we wanted to record a mover and a seconder. Okay, Jeremy moved it. Oh, you can't because you're a guest. Michelle, and then, yes, Brenda, sorry, seconded it. Michelle and Brenda. Excellent. Sorry, thank you we moved quick. I apologize for moving quick. I just conscious of time. Any other discussion? I appreciate the extra time people are given to this.
Can I just ask for clarification that with these changes we made here, this is not going to change pieces in the proposal? Edward, was that a formal, we can move forward in the relationship you proposed and establishing, even with this removal of your name and that at this point? What we're proposing as a different structure that feels more secure to some is maintaining everything else that has been laid out as the path. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah. No, this lets us not have to come back. So because the leadership team can then appoint those directors, having the conversations they need to have, getting the legal advice they need to have in there. So it lets us move. Yeah, which is helpful. Yeah. Are you ready for the question? Okay, if you've already voted, stick it in a thing and let's do that.
Let's start collecting.
Some people already submitted. If you want to change yours, I'm sure it's fine. If you wanted to change yours, put up your hand and we'll look for it.
So while we're doing that, and we'll do a quick count, while we're doing that, just a reminder that there is still opportunity for questions. There is still lots of opportunity for feedback. There will be lots more conversations. This is not the end of the road for the stuff. As I said, I'll reiterate again, the conversations won't be should we do it, it will be how do we do it. as we move forward, there'll be some really interesting things. We'll get to plans, and we'll get to details, and we'll get to more exciting questions. And this is a pretty exciting thing. There was a note. There was some ripped paper on here that I pulled out. One of the ripped paper said blessing on it, and I thought that was important just for us to remember that this being able to have kind of these conversations and look at this kind of thing is a real blessing. This is pretty exciting stuff. While they're doing that, the counting, are there any other questions or things people want to talk about in the interim about this? I don't know if that's a really appropriate thing to put here, but if there's any questions people have. There's some pizza left. Make sure there's pizza left. There's pop left. And Pat's not taking them home. That's very critical. You can also accept those changes, Dave, because those were approved. Okay. The Reverend Phil Reid has just reported that the vote was overwhelmingly yes. So congratulations. That's really, really exciting. Thanks, everybody. We will have the actual tallies recorded. I would like a motion to destroy the ballots. Barb and, yes, Michelle. Sorry. Brain's going. Barb, Michelle, all in favor? Any opposed? Excellent. We will destroy the ballots. Phil, do you want to come up and do a blessing and then we'll close this thing off?
We are in the season of Pentecost, when we remember that Jesus breathed his Spirit out on all. The wisdom resides with us as a collective. It has been gifted to all of us. Go with the blessing of knowing that your voice matters and it should be heard. Thank you. Amen. Have a good night.